Alright guys, let's get started with decimals, comparing and ordering. So comparing just means to look at two things and determine if they have anything that is different. Sometimes they do, sometimes one might be larger, one might be smaller, it might be exactly the same size, it just kind of depends. That's what comparing is. And once we've compared two things, or multiple things, we can then put them in order. So let's take a look at this. It says to compare and order decimals, you must compare each place value starting with the largest place value first. Now, I want you to forget about the word decimals for a moment. Everything we just said, compare and order numbers, you must compare each place value starting with the largest place value. That's nothing new. We've always compared numbers that way. So let's talk about what it looks like when we do this with decimals. It's really nothing different. Decimals should be lined up vertically, up and down. To make comparisons easy. So most of the time, especially on tests, you'll see decimals written down here below where it goes horizontally on a line. You always want to line them up vertically. It's also a great idea to use a place value chart. That's not the first time that's come up in our decimal lessons. So we're going to use our place value chart to organize your numbers. Keeps everything lined up nicely, and also takes a lot of stuff out of your head and puts it on paper. You don't have to keep up with as much. Okay, we're going to use something called inequality symbols. Inequality. So equality would be equal, right? In, the prefix, means not, so not equal. So it's just signs that mean these numbers are not equal, and it gives us a little bit more information. That's these guys over here. Okay. So inequality symbols are just the less than or greater than sign to show the relationship between numbers. If the values are equal, we're just going to use an equal sign. Alrighty. So if we have this, this means less than. This one right here is going to mean greater than. And this one's going to mean obviously equal or equal to. Let's put equal. I think we know what that means. Those are your main signs that we're going to stick with when we're directly comparing numbers. Okay, there are others, but we're going to keep things simple. All right, let's move on down our page a little bit here. All right, so it told us at the beginning we were going to line things up vertically, and right now these are lined up horizontally. That really doesn't help us much. Now, I've given you a place value chart here. So let's put these numbers on our place value chart. And notice that we have a decimal point in each of these numbers, and there's a whole line taken up for decimal points. I'm going to go ahead and just draw that in, because I know that's where my decimal point is. And the benefit of that, and you don't have to have a place value chart to do this, guys. You can do this down the side of your paper, just on notebook paper or even in the margin of a quiz or a test. As long as you line up your decimal points, it's going to make it very easy to line up your place value. So just write neatly and line up those decimal points. You're going to hear me say it a lot this year. All right, so let's write each one. So the first one is we have 30 hundredths. So we have 0 ones. I don't have to think too hard about this because I already have my decimal points down. So go ahead and write those numbers in. 78 hundredths, 3 hundredths, 87 hundredths, 37 hundredths, and 7 hundredths. This will be my final number in this series. Okay, so I notice all these numbers go out to the hundredths place. None of them have anything in the ones place, and they have different amounts of tenths and hundredths. Now, it's very easy to see that when it's lined up like this, because I can compare each place value at the same time. This is why this is not an optional thing. This is how I want you to write. Anytime we're comparing decimals, I want you to do this so you can look at place value compared to each other. All right, so they said, just like any number, I start with the largest place value. There's nothing in the ones place of any of these numbers, so that's not going to help me. So I'm going to go to the next place value spot, which would be the tenths place. And they said from greatest to least, so I'm going to find the greatest number based on the tenths place. That would be this 8. This one has 8 tenths, and everything else is less than that. I don't have to look at anything else right now because it doesn't matter what's over there. Okay, let's think about that for a minute. 1/10 is it going to be greater? So 1/10 is going to be greater than what's the maximum number we can have in any spot? It'd be a 9. So 9 hundredths and 1/10. 9 hundredths is less than 1/10. To put this in terms of something that you can picture, a tenth would be like a dime. A hundredth would be like a penny. So 9 pennies is always going to be less than 1 dime. So here, if I have 8 dimes, doesn't matter how many pennies I have, because it's always going to be less. So as long as nothing else is 8, I'm good to go. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and put that over here. And I'm going to line things up here just because it's a good practice to have. 0.87, 0.87 hundredths. Okay, now I want to make sure I don't skip anything, so I can cross it out. I can put a check mark through it, whatever works for you, just so I know I used it. All right, now I'm going to find the next largest number. So I have a 3, 7's the biggest, and yeah, 7 definitely wins. So I'm going to write that number in second place, 78. So I'm still trying to keep things as lined up as possible. If you have kind of messy handwriting like me, that's okay. Just take your time, do your best. All right, so I use that. Next, I have a 3. Ooh, and another 3. Okay, so I have this top one and this one down here. The rest, other two are zeros. So I'm going to go to the next place value just to settle this tie. Say both is like 3 dimes here. Then we have 1 hundredth, or I'm sorry, 0 hundredths and 7 hundredths. So 3 dimes and 0 pennies and 7 pennies. 7 pennies is going to win. So this is next, 0 and 37 hundredths. All right, then I already know this one has to be next, 0 and 30 hundredths. All right, then I have these two, and it's pretty obvious here. I have no tenths, 3 hundredths and 7 hundredths. 7 hundredths is going to win. And I can easily compare that because I'm comparing the same place value. They have the same meaning. So I can very quickly make a decision. All right, and I'm left with 3 hundredths. All right, there we go. So, greatest to least. Guys, before you move on, do not fall for the trick. It's a very old trick. Make sure you actually did this. Kind of goes back to our problem solving. Even though this is not a word problem, make sure you actually answered the question. And we did do that this time. Greatest to least. Okay. They're hoping you're going to mess that up. Don't let them win. They're evil. Okay. So, now we'll go down here. And does anyone see something odd or suspicious here? Yeah, that's what we just talked about, isn't it? Not greatest to least anymore. They reversed it on you. Okay, and I bet they're hoping that you're going to, because you just did a greatest to least problem, that you're going to come here and say, oh, I'm going to do greatest to least. I got this. Don't fall for it. Okay, I'm going to let you work that one on your own. You can pause the video here, and then we'll pick up on page 2 when you are done. All right, let's take a look at page 2. Okay, it says which number is not equivalent to the others. Not equivalent. Now, I did not give you a place value chart here. That's not going to stop us. for figuring this out. Oh, look, this looks different. I bet I should circle it and move on. What do you think? I'm just going to write it here. 5 and 3 over 100 is not equivalent because it's a fraction. That makes it not equivalent. Okay. It didn't say which one looks different, did it? It said which one is not equivalent. Guys, equivalent means equal. Same value. Okay, and a fraction can have the same value as a decimal. Okay, 0.5 is 1/2, right? 0.5, 5/10, is equal to 1 over 2, 1/2. So it can still be equivalent. So I can't just assume that. Okay, so let's make sure we prove each of these answers. Okay, I did not give you a place value chart, but that is not going to stop me from lining up my decimals and writing this vertically. So do that with me. I'm going to write this out to the side here. 5 and 3/100. 5 and 30/100. 5 and 30,000ths. This one goes up to the thousandths place. And 5, okay, let's review. We haven't talked about fractions yet. This is 3/100. Now think about the way I just said that. Can we put that in a decimal spot? Do we have a hundredths place? Yes. So 5 and 3/100. You need to go out 1, 2 spots to the hundredths place. I'm going to put a 3 there. And I got to have a placeholder 0, otherwise that 3 is going to snap back over here. All right, so that's what that looks like in decimal form. Let's take a look at these 4 numbers now. Now, first thing I notice is that the first and last number are exactly the same. They have exactly the same value, so interesting. Another thing I notice is that I have different numbers of, or different amounts of decimal digits. And I'm tempted to just put this one here because this goes out to the thousandths place. 5 and 30,000ths is not equivalent because it goes to the thousandths place. But let's look at this for a minute. Remember, this 0 just means we don't have any thousandths. If I were to cover up that 0, doesn't that start looking kind of familiar? Another thing I can do is, without changing these numbers, I can add a 0 so they all have the same number. I'm not changing the value. I'm just saying they have 0 thousandths. Now when I do that, what do we notice? 3 of them are the same, and 1 of them is not like the other. Okay, so that would be this one right here, which would be this guy right here, 5 and 30/100. So 5 and 30/100 is not equivalent because I'm going to let you figure that out, or not figure out, I'm going to let you give your reason for why that is different. Go ahead and put that in your own words. Write that in the space below. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. We are going to skip down to which number is not between. Okay, so we're going to start right here. And guys, anytime you see this, underline that word, because that completely flips the meaning of this whole statement. Okay, if I got rid of it, which number is between, I'm looking for a number that's greater than this and less than that. But not between means it has to be either less than this one or greater than this one. So let's get our number line here. And I'm going to write this 2.93, 2 and 93/100. And I'm going to put 4 and 56/100 over here. Now, this is not a filled number line for you. I'm just kind of giving myself a place to draw things in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, right here, I'm just kind of estimating here. I'm going to write the number 3 right there, because 3 should be pretty close to 2.93. 293/100 is very close to 3. And then I'm going to put a 4 right here. Just kind of estimate. It does not have to be perfect. Okay, I don't have a perfect scale on this number line. That's okay. This is just helping me organize my thinking. And guys, they're not going to always give you a number line. That's okay, because guess what? We know how to draw a line. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to put each of these on here. 3.58, 3 and 58 hundredths. So that's going to be, it's almost 3.5. It's a little bit more than 3.5. So 3.5 would be right here. So I'm going to go a little bit further and write that. Right kind of slant here. 5.8 goes right there. Okay. So I'm just going to underline it to remind myself I did that one already. All right. So 2 and 98 hundredths. Let's see. Well, here's 2 and 93 hundredths. Guys, if you're confused, think about money. $2.93. This is not 93 cents, 98 cents. It has 5 more cents. So that's going to be like right here. Now, if you get to a point here where it starts getting kind of crowded, just do this right here. Okay. Don't try to squeeze it in. 2 and 98 hundredths. Okay, I did that one. Okay, 3 and 8 tenths. So here's the whole number 3. I don't have quite enough to get to 4. Here's 5 tenths, almost 6 tenths. So that's going to be 8 tenths. Going to be right around here. Just approximating. Go sideways a little bit here. 3.8, 3 and 8 tenths. All right. Okay, 4 and 6 tenths. Here's 4. This is 4 and 5 tenths. Well, 6 tenths is going to be on this side of it, right? This is only 5 dimes and 6 pennies. If this helps, give yourself a 0 right there. I'm not changing the value. That's $4.60, $4.56. It tells you it has to be over here somewhere. Okay, and 5 and 35 hundredths. I'm sorry, 4 and 35 hundredths. So here's 4. And let's see, here's 35 hundredths, 56 hundredths is definitely going to be less than that. Somewhere in here, approximately. 4 and 35 hundredths. Okay, so we got a lot written here. We know that it needs to not be between these two numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a different color here. And I'm just going to start crossing things out here. So it can't be anything in this area here. Okay, here are our numbers that they have to be not between. Covering up my numbers, we get the point. And you see, this is the only one that is not between those. Everything else is somewhere in between those things. All right, so there's going to be my answer. 4 and 6 tenths. So I got a lot happening here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I write my answer, because this up here is not my answer. This number line, that's my proof. That's showing my work. I'm going to write my answer here and put a big box around it to make sure we're clear. All right, let's check this out. How many tenths are in a whole? Okay, well, one whole that would be 10 tenths, right? If you want to talk about money, then 10 dimes would make a whole, one whole dollar. So 10 tenths. How many hundredths are in one whole? Okay, well, that's like a penny, right? So one whole would be 100 pennies. So 100 hundredths. Now, I've talked about money a lot, and that's great until you get to the thousandths. There is no thousandths coin. So just be careful with that, and just know that it is smaller by a factor of 10 than a penny. Okay, so I want you to notice the trend here. It takes 10 tenths to make a whole. It takes 100 hundredths to make a whole. So following that pattern, how many thousandths does it take to make a whole? So smart, all of you. 1,000 thousandths. Okay, so write that in. And guys, that's not something you have to memorize. Just look at the name. Okay. Okay, so let's do this first one together on the next little section. How many total tenths rods would it take? So again, tenths are kind of like rods in base 10, right? Okay, so how many tenths rods would it take to build the number 4 and 5 tenths? Okay, so right here we would have, well, let's think about this for a minute. 4 holes, excuse me, 4 holes would be how much? Well, 1 hole was 10, so 4 holes would be 40. I'm just going to put a T for tenths. Okay, and then, well, this says it in its name, right? 5 tenths would be 5 tenths. Okay, so if I combine all that together, then that would give me 45 tenths. Now, guys, another way to think about this is, if whatever they're asking you for, in this case they're asking for how many tenths, I want you just to start your number in that place value and ignore the decimal. So if we start right there, pretend that decimal is not even there, and we see the number 45, that's where our 45 comes from. So you don't even have to necessarily do what I just did there. Okay. All right. Let's do a hundredths example down in the next section. Okay, let's do the same number, 3 and 4 tenths. Hundredths. Well, here's the problem. I don't have anything in the hundredths place, but remember what I said we could do earlier. Can always add a 0 to get out to that spot, right? All right, so 3 holes would give us how many hundredths? How many hundredths are in a hole? Well, in 1 hole, there's 100 of them. So in 3 of them, you're going to end up with 300 hundredths. Okay. 4 tenths. Okay, now this gets a little bit tricky. You can think about money here. Okay, 1 dime would be 10 pennies, right? 1 dime is 10 pennies. So 1 tenth would be 10 hundredths. So 4 of them would be 40 hundredths. Add all together. Now, before I add that, I want you to look back over here. Remember what I said? Find what place value they're asking for, hundredths. Kind of put a line through that. That's where your number is going to start. We're going to ignore the decimal point, and I see 340. 340 hundredths. So see if that matches what we got. 300 plus 40. Yes, it does. Okay. All right. I'm going to let you work on the rest individually. That concludes our decimals ordering and comparing lesson.